Hercule Poirot and the mystery beneath the Sapphire Bridge follows the detective as he uncovers hidden danger beneath the glittering arches, where beauty masks a web of deceit. Chapter 1. The Sapphire Bridge affair. It began with a scream that did not echo, only vanished into the heavy fog curling over the river. At precisely 7:03 p.m., the ornate lanterns lining the Sapphire Bridge flickered against the encroaching mist, their golden glow struggling against the dusk. The bridge itself was a marvel built a century ago to commemorate a royal wedding. Its pale blue arch was lined with sculpted stone lions and sapphire-tiled insets that caught the light like fragments of sky. Tourists adored it by day, lovers claimed it by night, and the wealthy few who lived along its banks claimed it as part of their legend. Tonight, however, it was death that claimed it. Constable Avery was first on the scene, summoned by a breathless errand boy who had sprinted down from the tea pavilion in Tranquility Park. The boy spoke of a woman in white, draped against the balustrade, a strange ribbon of crimson running down her sleeve and dripping onto the lion's paw. Avery reached the spot moments later and confirmed what the boy had seen. The woman was young, perhaps 30, with raven dark hair cascading over her shoulders. She wore a pale ivory evening gown, pearl buttons running down to her waist, and an expression of absolute stillness etched across her features. Her throat had been slashed cleanly, with chilling precision. A sapphire brooch, shaped like a flower, clung to her bodice. No weapon, no footprints on the wet stone, no signs of struggle, and no witnesses who had seen the actual killing. But someone had heard a soft, deliberate tune being hummed nearby just before the scream. A waltz, the kind played in grand halls, not on river banks. By 7:27 p.m., the fog had thickened. The body was removed under a shroud, and the Sapphire Bridge sealed off. The press, already twitching at the scent of high society scandal, gathered on the far bank like crows on a chapel roof. The woman was soon identified: Miss Celestine Leroy, heiress to a fortune in rare antiquities. She had been attending the midwinter soiree at the Henslow Manor, just half a mile upriver, hosted by the formidable Lady Agatha Henslow, woman known for her exquisite parties, political connections, and, as some whispered, her ability to ruin reputations with a single raised brow. Celestine had left the soiree early, it seemed, after a whispered altercation with her fiancé, the Honorable Giles Ashcombe, dashing, debt-ridden, and heir to nothing but a crumbling hunting lodge. She had asked for her wrap, thanked the host, and stepped into the cold mist alone. None had seen her again until she was found lifeless against the sapphire-lined parapet. That same night, 2 letters were delivered, one to Scotland Yard, the other posted privately from the Riverside Post Office near the Pavilion of the Six Swans, addressed in perfect copperplate to M. Hercule Poirot, Esq., Flat 103, Whitehaven Mansions, London. Urgent, a deaf to elegant, to be simple. It reached him at 8:45 the following morning, when Poirot was enjoying his second boiled egg and gently correcting the symmetry of his toast points. Hastings, recently returned from a month abroad, glanced at the letter Poirot now held delicately between thumb and forefinger. "Something amiss, old chap?" he asked, already reaching for his coat with a kind of hopeful trepidation. Poirot did not answer immediately. He reread the letter, then placed it precisely beside his saucer. "My friend," he said at last, with the calm gravity he reserved for very particular occasions, "there has been a murder, but not merely a murder, non. It is a performance, a composition, if you like, a waltz played in blood, the kind of crime that must be solved not by footstep or fingerprint, but by psychology, by contradiction, by what people do not say." Hastings blinked. "Someone you know?" Poirot shook his head. "No, but someone knows me, and they wish me to know that this is no ordinary matter." He stood, adjusted his cuffs, and brushed a speck of lint from his lapel with fastidious care. We go to Hensel-on-Thames, Mon ami, to a Sapphire Bridge, a dead heiress, and if I am correct, a collection of very elegant liars. He paused at the door. And bring your umbrella, Hastings. The fog, I think, will not be kind. And with that, the investigation began beneath the fog-choked arch of the Sapphire Bridge, where the river flowed quietly over secrets, and every smile had an echo behind it. Chapter 2. Shadows at Hensel-on-Thames. Morning sun was little more than a dull glow behind veils of mist as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived at Hensel-on-Thames. The town, elegant in its architecture and overly proud of its historical charm, was already abuzz with whispers of the murder. Shopkeepers huddled at doorways, gossiping with voices lowered just enough to make their curiosity seem dignified. Hensel Manor itself rose beyond the park, like a queen among courtiers, a grand stone edifice with arched windows and manicured hedges shaped like mythical beasts. Two swans glided across the private lake that curled around the manor's rear. Oblivious to the human scandal brewing within, the butler, a man named Bransley with a face like carved oak, admitted Poirot and Hastings with courteous reluctance. Lady Hensel is not taking visitors, he said stiffly. Poirot responded with a small, elegant bow. Ah, but I am not merely a visitor, monsieur. I am Hercule Poirot. That name, though spoken gently, seemed to tremble in the air. Bransley's brow twitched an imperceptible shift, but Poirot noticed it. We'll wait in the morning room, Poirot said with an almost imperceptible assertiveness. And please inform Lady Hensel that discretion is one of my least advertised qualities, yet most enduring. Bransley related that the morning room was a hushed chamber of velvet drapes, chinoiserie screens, and delicate porcelain figurines that looked as though they would shatter at a whisper. Hastings stood by the fireplace, admiring a painting of a hunt, while Poirot delicately paced the rug. She was murdered close to here, no? Poirot asked without turning. Hastings nodded. Yes, just downriver, beyond the pavilion of the 6 Swans. Poirot touched a vase on the mantel with his gloved fingertips. She left this house in the evening, alone, after an argument, and not long after, she is found dead. Hastings, mon ami, I wonder how many people in this house watched her leave. Before Hastings could reply, the door opened. Lady Agatha Hensel entered with regal composure, dressed in navy satin and pearls that whispered against one another as she moved. Monsieur Poirot, she said, voice clipped but controlled. I must confess I didn't expect you so swiftly. Poirot bowed deeply. Ah, madam, the promptness, it is the courtesy due to the dead. Nest's pause. She regarded him coolly, then gestured toward a chair. Celestine's death is a tragedy. A great many of us are in shock. Poirot's eyes never left hers. Mace Bean, sir. May I ask, madam, at what hour did Miss Leroy leave your party? Just after 7, she replied. She asked for her wrap and said she had a headache. She had argued with Giles, but it was nothing, I assure you. Lovers' quarrels always melodrama. And where was Giles Ashcombe when she left? A flicker passed through Lady Hensley's expression, like a curtain brushing a window pane. Still in the conservatory, I believe, speaking with Miss Maud Everley. Poirot's eyebrows lifted delicately. And who is Miss Everley? A friend of the family, an artist, very dear to us. She was staying the week. Still is. Then I would like to speak with her. And with the Honorable Mr. Ashcombe. Lady Hensley's hands tightened around her gloves. I must caution you, Monsieur Poirot. There's a great deal of grief in this house, and some discomfort with Scotland Yard's presence. Poirot smiled gently. Ah, but I am not of the Yard. I am Belgian, you see. My loyalty is to truth, not bureaucracy. A soft knock. Bransley reappeared. Miss Everley will see you in the conservatory, monsieur. Poirot and Hastings followed the butler down a long corridor that smelled faintly of lavender and old wood polish. The conservatory was bright, to bright glass walls wrapped in ivy, and heat radiating from a long-forgotten sun lamp. Among the foliage sat a woman with auburn curls, her eyes shadowed as though she hadn't slept. She was sketching something with a charcoal pencil, her strokes too harsh for the delicate orchid blooming beside her. "Miss Maud Everleigh?" Poirot asked gently. She looked up, blinking slowly. "Yes, I suppose you're here about Celestini." Poirot inclined his head. "You were close. She was difficult," Maud said plainly. "Beautiful, but brittle, like something made of sugar. Always afraid someone might take her place in the world." "Take her place, mademoiselle?" Maud leaned back. Giles was never hers. Not really. She only liked owning him. She hated competition. Poirot's gaze sharpened, though his tone remained serene. "And yet she argued with him. Was it jealousy? She accused me of wanting him. Maybe I did, once. But it wasn't like that anymore." Her voice dropped. "I think she knew something that frightened her. That's why she left early. Not because of me." "What did she know?" Poirot asked. Maud hesitated. Then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, a noise interrupted them. A sudden clatter from the hallway, the sharp crack of something breaking. Poirot rose. "Pardon me, mademoiselle. It seems the ghosts of this house do not like us whispering." As he stepped into the corridor, he glanced down and saw it. A single blue tile, shaped like a sapphire, lying shattered on the floor. Not from the bridge, but from the heel of a shoe. A woman's shoe. In Poirot's mind, ever precise, recorded the detail not for what it meant yet, but for what it would mean. The mystery, like the fog, was thickening. Chapter 3. The circle draws tighter. The broken tile had not been swept up. Poirot made certain of that. He knelt beside it now, in the marbled corridor outside the conservatory, his fingers resting lightly on his knees, eyes narrowed with interest. The fragment was unmistakable, a sapphire-glazed sliver no larger than a fingernail, but its shade matched precisely the tiled insets on the Sapphire Bridge, and it had not fallen from architecture. No, this had been part of a heel, a woman's heel. Someone had worn shoes embedded with the same sapphire tiling used on the bridge. A curious fashion statement, Hastings muttered from behind, watching Poirot's still form. "Do you suppose Celestine's shoes matched the bridge deliberately? She was that kind of woman, wasn't she?" Poirot didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the tile, then lifted to examine the long rug that ran along the corridor. Faint indentations, almost imperceptible, ran across it, leading toward the side drawing room. "Let us not make assumptions too quickly, mon ami," he said softly. "We must ask, why would a tile from a shoe be broken here, inside the manor, and not outside near the river?" They followed the impressions until they disappeared at the foot of the drawing room door. Poirot gave it a light knock before entering. Inside, a man stood at the window, his hands clenched behind his back. His blonde hair, too carefully combed, glinted in the weak sunlight filtering through the fog. He turned as they entered, eyes sharp, shoulders stiff. "Mr. Giles Ashcombe?" Poirot said with a slight bow. "Yes, you're the detective, I assume?" "I am Hercule Poirot." Ashcombe gave a tight smile. "Of course you are." He gestured toward a chair with forced civility, but remained standing himself. "I imagine you have questions," he said, folding his arms. "And I imagine everyone here is quite eager to point fingers in my direction." Poirot settled gently into the chair, adjusting his cuffs with meticulous care. "Might we begin, monsieur, with the last conversation you had with Miss Leroy?" Ashcombe's jaw tensed. "It was private." Poirot tilted his head. "Nevertheless, it is now pertinent." There was a long pause before Giles spoke. Celestini had this way of cornering people, making them feel like they owed her something simply because she was beautiful or rich or broken. "She said she didn't trust Maud. She said I was humiliating her. She caused a scene, and then she left, alone." "I believe so." I turned away. Needed air. Poirot's gaze sharpened slightly. And where were you when the body was found? I was still here, with several people. I made no attempt to hide. Poirot glanced down at Giles's feet. Brown brogues, well polished, flat-soled. Forgive the question, monsieur, but did Miss Leroy wear heels that evening? Giles blinked. Of course. She always did. Were they new? Perhaps distinctive? She was wearing some ridiculous custom design she'd commissioned, ivory satin with sapphire pieces, inlaid on the heels. She wanted to match the bridge, said it would be poetic. Hastings whistled softly. Then the tile. Poirot raised a finger. We must not jump to conclusions. Miss Leroy left the house wearing those shoes, but did she also die wearing them? Ashcombe's eyes narrowed. You think the shoes were switched? Poirot stood, his tone smooth as velvet. I think someone has gone to great trouble to control the narrative. Tell me, monsieur, were you in love with Miss Leroy? Giles gave a bitter laugh. Love? No, I was in an arrangement. The kind that satisfies debts, titles, and bank accounts. Love had nothing to do with it. And Miss Everleigh? Ashcombe's smile faded. Maud is none of your concern. Poirot inclined his head. But I am afraid she is, monsieur. Everything is of my concern. As Poirot and Hastings stepped into the hallway once more, Hastings spoke in a low voice. You believe someone returned with her shoes? But how could that be? And why? To create confusion, mon ami. To separate what is true from what is assumed. They passed a housemaid hurrying through the hall with a tray. She startled when she saw Poirot, nearly dropping a porcelain cup. Pardon, monsieur, she said. Dipping in a quick curtsy, Poirot turned to her gently. Mademoiselle, may I trouble you for a small observation? Did you see Miss Leroy when she left the manor last night? The girl blinked. No, sir. Only her wrap. It was handed to me by Miss Everleigh. She said Miss Leroy was in a hurry and waiting at the front steps. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Miss Everleigh fetched the wrap for her? Yes, sir. And after that, I didn't see Miss Leroy again. Poirot watched the girl scurry off, then turned to Hastings. You see, my friend, how does it begins? A woman leaves a party, and yet no one sees her go. Another delivers her coat. A shoe appears broken inside the house. Already, the story unravels. You think she never left? Hastings asked, astonished. Poirot's voice was calm. I think she left, but not in the way they say. And perhaps, not alive. He looked back down the corridor toward the conservatory. The next step, Hastings, is the examination of her belongings. If the shoes on her feet were not the same pair she wore when she left, then we are dealing not merely with a murder, but with a stage performance. And Poirot, the connoisseur of deception, knew well that the stage had only just been set. Chapter 4. The shoes she died in. Small police station at Henslow-on-Thames was a tidy brick building that smelled faintly of coal smoke and damp wool. Inside, an aging inspector named Braddock, with a mustache like an overgrown hedgerow and a deep suspicion of continental methods, met Poirot with a mix of civility and grudging curiosity. I've heard of you, Braddock said, pushing a tray of tea toward Poirot with more noise than was necessary. Scotland Yard says you do things backwards, but they usually work out in the end. Poirot smiled mildly. Ah, how kind. It is true sometimes the path that seems backward is merely more thorough. The inspector led them to the evidence room, where Celestine Leroy's personal effects had been laid out. A string of pearls, a silver compact, a wrap of ivory silk faintly scented with gardenia, and the shoes. Poirot approached them as though they were relics in a shrine. He examined the heels first. They were ivory satin, just as described, but the inlaid sapphire tiles, each cut with startling precision, were entirely intact. Not a single chip is missing. Curious, Poirot murmured, his fingertips brushing one of the heels delicately. Not the pair she left in, then. Hastings blinked. But they looked the same. Poirot straightened. Exactly. They were meant to. Braddock frowned. We had the body removed from the bridge within the hour. These shoes were on her feet. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You are certain? No one touched her before your men arrived. Braddock scratched his cheek. Only the boy who found her and the constable. Both swore they didn't move a thing. Poirot glanced at Hastings. Then someone dressed her post-mortem. The shoes she wore when she left the manor are not the ones she died in. They were switched. Braddock's brows knit. Switched? Why? Poirot walked slowly to the corner of the room. To suggest a lie. To make it seem she died exactly as she left. As if nothing interrupted her journey from party to bridge. But a lie always leaves behind a small inconsistency. He turned back to the inspector. Monsieur Braddock, I must see the body. Braddock hesitated. She's at the coroner's house. Examination starts this afternoon. You'll have to be quick. The coroner's residence was a modest house overlooking a quiet stretch of river. The viewing room was dim, curtains drawn, and smelled of antiseptic and old camphor wood. The coroner, a soft-spoken man named Hesselgrave, greeted them with polite detachment. I've not begun the full examination yet, but I can confirm the wound was inflicted with a very sharp blade. Clean, precise, no hesitation. Poirot nodded. And her shoes, did you note anything about them? Hesselgrave hesitated. They didn't quite match the abrasions on her heels, as though she had worn a different pair earlier in the evening. Not uncommon women change shoes for comfort. Oui, Poirot said softly, but not from discomfort to elegance. He stepped closer to the body. Even in death, Celestini retained a fragile beauty, her features serene, her skin pale beneath the soft cloth drawn over her. Poirot's gaze swept down, pausing at the feet. The shoes gleamed faintly in the low light, their sapphire tiles catching even the dimmest glow. But it was the soles that caught his attention. Do you see, Hastings? Hastings peered over his shoulder. What? No scuffing, no dirt. These shoes have not touched a bridge, a garden path, or a street. They are spotless. She did not walk in them. They were placed upon her feet after she was already gone. Poirot turned to the coroner. Did you note the time of death? Between 7 o'clock and 7:20, Hesselgrave replied. Hard to be more precise without internal examination. Poirot's expression did not change, but Hastings saw the faintest tightening around his jaw. Merci, Poirot said gently. As they left, the sun had begun to pierce the fog at last. Across the river, the towers of Henslow Manor stood in silhouette, monolithic, still, watchful. She was already dead before she reached the bridge, Hastings said, almost to himself. Poirot nodded. Yes, and someone carried her there, dressed her as she had left the party, and arranged her body in that poetic pose. Why go to all that trouble? To make the crime look simple, Poirot said. To conceal the one thing that all murderers must fear. The moment where logic does not match emotion, where what we are told does not feel true. He paused, gazing across the water. And I believe someone in that house saw her after she should have been gone. Hastings' eyes widened. You mean someone's already lying? Poirot's gaze sharpened. Oh, my dear Hastings, at least 3 of them are lying. The question is who lies to protect, who lies from guilt, and who lies to kill. He glanced down at the sapphire heel fragment in his pocket once more, then looked up at the manor with calm certainty. Let us return. The theater is set, and the actors begin to falter. Chapter 5. The portrait in the parlor. When Poirot and Hastings returned to Henslow Manor, the mist had begun to lift, revealing the garden in full. Frost still clung to the hedges, and the gravel paths glistened beneath the weight of winter's breath. The manor's great oak doors creaked open once more, and this time they were met not by Bransley, but by Lady Henslow herself. She was dressed in gray now, simple but elegant, and the color seemed to drain her expression further, as though she were already mourning something beyond Celestini Leroy. You return quickly. Monsieur Poirot, she said. Poirot bowed. I am like the tide, madam. I retreat only to return with greater clarity. Lady Henslow gave a weary nod. You will find everyone in the parlor. The inspector called ahead. They are expecting you. The parlor was a high-ceilinged chamber with tapestries of wild hunts and faded portraits, whose painted eyes watched from the walls with silent judgment. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting flickers of light upon the faces gathered. Maud Everleigh stood near the window, hands clasped tightly, her gaze turned inward. Giles Ashcombe lounged in a leather chair, one leg crossed, though the stiffness in his shoulders betrayed the act. And finally, a new presence, Miss Vivian Henslow, the lady's niece, a young woman of delicate features, dark-ringed eyes, and a thin notebook clutched tightly in her lap. Poirot stepped inside slowly, his eyes sweeping across the room. You have all been most patient, he began. But now the questions must grow more direct, and I hope, Ms. Amos, your answers are more honest. No one spoke. First, Mademoiselle, Poirot said. Turning to Vivian, I do not believe we have met. May I ask, did you attend the soirée the evening Miss Leroy died? Vivian looked up, blinking rapidly. No, I wasn't invited, yet you reside here. I'm only here for a few weeks, she replied. Lady Henslow said the party was for higher company. Hastings gave a disapproving glance toward the matriarch, but Poirot remained polite. And where were you that evening? In the East Wing. My room overlooks the drive. I was writing. Writing? I'm a poet, she said, flushing faintly. Well, I try to be. Poirot nodded. You saw nothing? Heard nothing? Vivian hesitated. I thought I heard someone walking in the corridor long after the guests left. Heavy footsteps, going toward the service staircase. I assumed it was Bransley. Poirot's eyes gleamed faintly, but Bransley was already asleep. I asked him earlier. Vivian's face paled. Giles scoffed. We're chasing shadows now, are we? Poirot turned to him with sudden sharpness. Tell me again, Monsieur, where were you at 7:15? I told you. Speaking with Maud in the conservatory. Poirot nodded. Yes, and she confirmed that. But what did you do afterward? I returned here, to the parlor, alone. Did anyone see you? No, Giles admitted. Poirot paced slowly toward the fireplace. And you, Miss Everleigh, after you gave the wrap to the maid, did you return to the party? Maud blinked. No, I went to the south terrace to get some air. Also alone? Yes, and no one saw you? No, she said, then added more defensively. But I didn't do anything wrong. Poirot turned back to the fire. Ah, but that is what makes it so fascinating, mademoiselle. Everyone was alone. Everyone saw nothing. And yet, a young woman was murdered. He lifted a framed photo from the mantel. It was Celestine Leroy, standing beside Lady Henslow in the garden. Both women wore summer dresses, and both smiled, not the warm smile of affection, but the tight, practiced expression of two women locked in silent rivalry. Poirot held up the frame. Madame Henslow, how long have you known Miss Leroy? 3 years, she replied coolly. She became entangled with Giles, and I allowed the connection to grow for his sake. Poirot nodded slowly. Forgive me if I say so, madam, but that does not sound entirely affectionate. Lady Henslow said nothing. Poirot turned again to Vivian. Mademoiselle, I would very much like to see your notebook. Vivian froze. Why? Because I believe poets see things others overlook. Reluctantly, she passed it to him. Poirot turned the pages with gentle care. Snippets of verse, strange phrases, melancholy thoughts. But then, tucked between two poems, she said she knew. She said she'd ruin him. Her mouth curled like it knew the end. And yet, she wore the same shoes as before. Funny, the same, but not the same. Poirot paused, staring at the words. Then he looked up. You saw her after all, didn't you? Vivian shrank back. only for a moment, in the hallway near the west staircase. I heard her voice. I thought she was leaving, but something seemed wrong. She looked pale, and the shoes, something about them caught my eye. They were scuffed, not pristine, not the ones she died in. Vivian nodded slowly. Poirot closed the notebook. "Thank you, mademoiselle. You have helped more than you know." He glanced around the room. The walls no longer seemed still. Each face held a flicker of alarm, of calculation. Poirot gave a polite bow. "One last request. No one is to leave the estate. For now, the truth is taking its first breath, and I should hate for it to be strangled prematurely." And with that, he exited the room, leaving silence in his wake and behind him. A house no longer quite so sure of its innocence. Chapter 6. The first false lead. Following morning, the sky above Henslow-on-Thames was brittle and gray, as if the world itself paused, holding its breath. Poirot, ever precise, was already dressed and seated in the Manor's breakfast room, sipping chocolate from a porcelain cup as Hastings entered, bleary-eyed and muttering about damp sheets and suspicious toast. "Sleep eludes me when the facts do not align," Poirot said mildly, "and we are now at a dangerous moment, mon ami, when a case pretends to offer its solution too early." Hastings frowned. "What do you mean?" Poirot tapped his spoon gently. "We are about to be handed a suspect, a convenient one." His prediction proved prescient. At precisely 10 minutes past 8, Inspector Braddock arrived in haste, his boots still damp with dew and his overcoat dusted with frost. He looked self-satisfied, in the way of men who believe the puzzle has been solved before the final piece is placed. "Well," Braddock announced, removing his gloves with theatrical purpose, "we've got him." Poirot arched his brow. "Him?" Braddock held up a folded telegram. "The post office clerk came forward this morning. Said someone posted a letter last night around 7:30 from the Pavilion Lane box. The address was to you, Monsieur Poirot." "Ah," Poirot said softly, "the note that summoned me." "Exactly." The clerk remembered the man. Tall, sharp-featured, well-dressed, claimed to be a friend of the Leroy family. When we showed him a photograph, he identified Giles Ashcombe. Hastings let out a low whistle. "But Giles said nothing about posting a letter." Braddock nodded. "We picked him up an hour ago. He didn't deny it. Said he panicked, claimed he found Celestine's body, and thought sending a note to Poirot would be less scandalous than contacting the yard." Poirot said nothing for a long moment. "And yet," he said slowly, "he told us yesterday that he was in the parlor all evening. Alone, yes, but not outdoors." A small but distinct contradiction. Braddock crossed his arms. "Which means he lied, and had an opportunity and motive. We both know his finances depended on that engagement." Poirot turned his cup on its saucer. "Yes, it is all too perfect." Braddock blinked. "Too perfect, my dear Inspector," Poirot said gently. "When the murderer leaves behind footprints, motive, and a witness all in harmony, it is either an act of extraordinary arrogance or a trap." Hastings shifted in his chair. "You don't believe Ashcombe did it?" Poirot stood slowly. "I believe he lied, but not necessarily about murder." Lady Henslow entered just then, her expression tight. "I heard Giles was arrested. Is it true?" Poirot gave a small nod. "Indeed, madam." She sank into a chair. "Well, he was always a fool." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Not devastated by the news, madam?" She met his eyes with cool defiance. "He was never worthy of Celestine, and yet you approved the match." Her silence was enough. Poirot turned to Braddock. "I would like to speak with Mr. Ashcombe." Braddock hesitated, then gave a tight nod. "He's in the study. I'll have a man stand outside." The study was dim, its curtains drawn, a single lamp casting golden light over a worn writing desk. Giles sat in a high-backed chair, his wrists free, but his demeanor subdued. He looked up as Poirot entered. "Well, then, come to tie the noose." Poirot remained standing. You posted the letter, monsieur. Why conceal it? Giles stared into the fire. Because I didn't want it to look like I'd known that she was dead. Poirot stepped closer. You found the body? Yes, on my way back from the bridge. I went there after the argument, wanted to clear my head. Saw something white near the parapet. When I got close, I realized it was her. He clenched his hands. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I remembered your name from the newspapers. Thought you'd be discreet. You left the scene? I didn't touch her, Giles said quickly. I swear it. Poirot paced slowly. And yet, that would mean she was already there by 7:30, which contradicts the coroner's estimate of death occurring just after 7. Giles blinked. Yes, that fits, doesn't it? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Unless the body was already posed when you arrived, then your letter becomes not a panic, but a signal, a decoy. One the real killer hoped would point us to you. Giles stood. You think I was framed? I think, Poirot said softly, that you have told the truth only partially, and that the rest is hidden behind your pride. He paused, then added, and I think Miss Everleigh knows more than she admits. As do you. But neither of you are murderers. Poirot turned to leave, his tone quiet. For now, monsieur, remain where you are. Back in the hallway, Hastings leaned in. You really believe he didn't do it? Poirot's gaze was distant. The shoes, Hastings. The shoes, Hastings frowned. The ones she was found in. Yes, Giles Ashcombe could not have switched them. He did not have access to the wardrobe. But someone in that house did. He walked to the window. Where the frost had begun to melt in rivulets, the false lead has arrived, just as I expected. But beneath it, another truth begins to emerge. He tapped the glass. Let us observe who grows nervous, for the murderer will not enjoy being upstaged by a man they sought to frame. Chapter 7. The psychological gamulator. That afternoon, Poirot requested that tea be served in the south drawing room, a space usually reserved for quieter company and delicate gossip. It was a calculated choice. The room was smaller, more intimate, and lacking the grand distractions of portraits or sweeping views. It offered nowhere for the mind or guilt to hide. One by one, the guests of Henslow Manor joined him. Maud Everleigh arrived first, her movements sharper than before, fingers restless in her lap. Vivian followed silently, clutching a leather-bound book of blank pages like a shield. Lady Henslow came last, gliding in with cool elegance, her hands folded over a handkerchief as white and composed as she was. Poirot sat opposite them all, hands steepled, eyes half-flitted in thought. Hastings remained to the side, a silent observer. The air in the room had changed, no longer curious, but defensive. You must forgive me, Poirot said softly, if I behave like a doctor this afternoon. For I believe this house suffers from a malady not of the body, but of the soul. Lady Hensley's brow twitched. We are all grieving, Monsieur Poirot. Some confusion is to be expected. Ah, yes, Poirot murmured, but grief is an honest emotion. And honesty, I fear, is not abundant here. Maud exhaled. This again. You think we're all hiding something? Poirot smiled. Mademoiselle, hiding something? Perhaps, but lying outright? Ah, no, not all of you. Only one. He allowed silence to settle. He studied each face as it reacted. Maud's eyes darted to the floor. Vivian held her breath. Lady Henslow did not flinch. Poirot stood and began to walk slowly behind them, his voice quiet, almost musing. There are small truths that people hold close, secrets not born of guilt, but of pride or fear. Mademoiselle Everleigh, for example, you were not merely angry with Miss Leroy. You were frightened. She threatened to expose something, did she not? Maud's head jerked up. She said she would tell everyone that I forged the paintings in the Manor Gallery. She said I was trying to sell copies as originals, Lady Hensla turned sharply to her. You what? Poirot raised a hand. Not a crime of blood, but a crime of desperation, perhaps? And one Miss Leroy knew of. She used it to twist the blade in your side. But that, mademoiselle, does not make you a killer. He turned to Vivian. And you, Mademoiselle Poetry, is a refuge, is it not? You saw something that night. Not just shoes. A shadow, a movement. Something you have not yet spoken aloud. Vivian shook her head, her voice a whisper. I'm not sure. I heard a whisper. Someone crying. From the linen corridor near the servants' wing. I thought it was the wind, but it was late after the party, maybe just past midnight. Someone crying, Poirot repeated softly. After the murder had already taken place. He turned his eyes to Lady Hensla now. And you, Madam, may I be so bold as to ask, did you know that Miss Leroy intended to end the engagement? A pause. Then, yes, Lady Hensla said. Hastings blinked. You did. She told me the day before the soiree. Said Giles was unworthy. Said she intended to announce it that night. Poirot gave a small nod. And that would explain your calm this morning. You were not mourning the loss of a future daughter-in-law. You had already buried her role in your family. Lady Hensla folded her hands tighter. I did not kill her. Poirot turned suddenly, his tone still gentle, but firm. And yet someone in this room moved her body, switched her shoes, composed her like a painting on that bridge. That was not a crime of rage, it was one of intent, of symbolism. Maud's voice cracked. What does it mean? Poirot stepped toward the fire, casting their reflections in its flicker. It means the killer wanted her to be remembered in a certain way. Not as she was vindictive, manipulative, vulnerable, but as something tragic, beautiful, framed beneath the bridge that mirrored her shoes. He paused, and that, Ms. Amos, is not how most killers think. He let the silence stretch again. Someone in this house loved her, even as they killed her. The words landed with force. Lady Hensley's lips parted slightly, but no sound escaped. Maud looked away. Vivian whispered. Then they dressed her. With care, Poirot nodded. Precisely. Like a farewell, a knock broke the moment. Bransley stepped in with uncharacteristic hesitation. Inspector Braddock has called. He says another item was found. A pair of shoes, scuffed, ivory satin, discarded in the wood behind the west garden. Poirot's face was still. Then slowly, he turned toward the women. No more lies, he said, because now the truth is being found in the soil itself. And he exited the room, knowing at least one heart behind him had begun to beat faster for fear of what came next. Chapter 8. The second Secreth shoes, when Poirot finally examined them, were nestled inside a worn velvet satchel buried beneath a thin veil of damp leaves and frost. Inspector Braddock stood nearby, arms folded and lips pursed, clearly irritated by the sudden complication to what had seemed a tidy case. Gardner found them this morning, he grunted, behind the topiary near the south hedge, about 40 paces from the western door. That satchel's old manor property, no doubt. Monograms worn away. Poirot crouched by the evidence table, gently lifting one of the shoes with a gloved hand. They were scuffed, just as Vivian had described, creases at the toe, mud along the sole, and a single cracked sapphire inset near the heel, the twin to the fragment he carried in his pocket. These, he said softly, are the shoes Miss Leroy left the house wearing. Braddock scoffed. So she switched them en route, changed footwear on the bridge. Poirot shook his head. None. These were removed after her death. The clean shoes, pristine, unworn, were placed upon her corpse. Braddock grunted. Then we're not just looking at a killer. We're looking at someone staging a death. Poirot looked up. Indeed. And now, monsieur, we begin to understand the motive, not for the murder alone, but for the story told afterward. He paused, and that story is beginning to collapse. Back at the manor, the mood had changed. The halls felt colder now, more cavernous. The servants moved with eyes downcast, and the guests no longer lingered in the drawing rooms. Poirot summoned Lady Henslow, Maud Everleigh, and Vivian to the library. He allowed no excuses. Hastings stood in the corner, arms crossed. On the desk between them sat the scuffed shoes, silent and accusing. Vivian was the first to speak. "Those were hers," she whispered. "I remember. The cracked sapphire, I saw it before the party began." Poirot nodded. "And yet, these were not on her when she was found. Someone removed them. Why?" No answer. Poirot's gaze moved to Maud. "Mademoiselle, did you visit the garden after the party?" Maud's eyes widened. "No, I told you. I went to the south terrace. I was alone, but the garden is visible from the terrace, is it not?" She hesitated. "Yes." Poirot turned now to Lady Henslow. "Madam, the velvet satchel in which the shoes were found, it belonged to this house, did it not?" Her voice was low. "It did. From the boot room, I believe. Anyone might have taken it." She hesitated longer this time. "In theory, yes." Poirot tapped the desk with a fingertip. "Then allow me to pose a possibility. Miss Leroy was murdered not on the bridge, but somewhere within this estate, likely the West Wing. Her body was moved later, her appearance adjusted to fit the story someone wanted told. And that someone took care not only to choose the right shoes but to hide the original pair. Why?" He paused. "Because the original shoes carried the truth. They spoke of movement, of a struggle, perhaps even of blood. And someone was afraid that detail would betray them." Silence again. Poirot turned suddenly to Hastings. "Do you recall what Vivian said about hearing crying in the corridor?" "Yes." Hastings nodded. "Past midnight." Poirot looked back to the women. "That was not grief. It was guilt." Vivian flinched. "I didn't mean non, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "Not you, but you heard someone. Someone who could not sleep. Someone who returned to the place where the truth had unfolded." His eyes rested on Maud Everleigh. She shook her head. "I didn't kill her, no," Poirot said. "But you found her." Maud froze. "I what?" "In the corridor," he continued. "Somewhere near the linen press or one of the servants' staircases. You found her lying there, already dead. You panicked." Maud's mouth opened, then closed. "You couldn't call for help," Poirot said softly. "You knew you'd be accused. You had argued. You had motive. But you also loved her once, did you not?" Maud's shoulders trembled. "She was cruel," she said. "But I did. Once, you switched the shoes," Poirot said gently. "Not to deceive the police, but to preserve her dignity. To keep her perfect. You thought if she looked beautiful, tragic, people would forget what she had become." Tears now glistened in Maud's eyes. "I didn't kill her, I know," Poirot said. "But your attempt to protect her legacy has misled the investigation. And worse, it may have shielded the real murderer." Lady Henslow rose abruptly. "This is absurd. We are being strung along by theatrics." Poirot turned to her. "And yet, madam, the person responsible knew which shoes Celestini wore that night. Only those closest to her could have known. Someone who touched her wardrobe. Someone who watched her dress. Or," he paused, "someone who had dressed her before." Vivian gasped softly. Lady Hensley's expression froze. Poirot bowed slightly. "The lies are thinning, mesdames. And now it is only a matter of who will speak the truth before it is spoken for them." And with that, he exited the room, leaving the scuffed shoes on the desk and three women whose secrets now pressed dangerously close to the surface. Chapter 9. Hidden. Threads. Poirot's footsteps echoed softly through the corridor as he left the library, his expression unreadable. Hastings caught up with him near the stairwell, his voice pitched low with concern. "I say, Poirot, you gave Maud quite the fright. Are you certain she wasn't involved beyond the shoes?" Poirot did not answer immediately. He paused near a sunlit alcove where ivy crept across the window glass like an old secret. trying to reclaim the house. She is guilty, yes, he murmured, but not of murder. Maud Everly committed an emotional crime, an act of concealment born from pain, not malice. Hastings followed as Poirot resumed walking, his pace slow and deliberate. And Lady Hensla? Ah, Hastings, Poirot said, a glint in his eye. It is the nature of guilt I study. Lady Hensla has the bearing of one who buries emotion deep beneath poise. That kind of self-control is admirable, until it is used to protect something. They descended the narrow servants' staircase into the west wing, a part of the manor seldom used. The walls lined with faded family portraits and dust-heavy sconces. Poirot stopped outside a small door at the far end, barely visible behind an old tapestry. The linen corridor, he said quietly, where Vivian heard crying, where I suspect the scene first played out. The corridor beyond was dim and musty. Tall shelves stood along the walls, stacked with folded bedsheets, towels, and lace-draped linens untouched by recent hands. The floor was bare stone, and the windows small and clouded with condensation. Poirot moved with care, scanning each corner. There, he said suddenly, pointing to a smear on the lower edge of the shelf. Hastings leaned closer, barely visible, but undeniable. A streak of something dark, now dried. Blood? Hastings asked. Possibly, Poirot replied. Or perhaps rouge from a sleeve. Either way, something was dragged. He followed the faint trail to the door at the corridor's end, leading, Poirot knew, to a secondary exit into the garden. A shortcut, one that would allow a body to be moved discreetly. He stood in silence for a moment, taking in the scene. The murder happened here, Hastings. There was an argument, a strike, quick, efficient. No blood on the carpet upstairs, no disruption in the guest wing. Here, the silence was perfect. Hastings shivered slightly. So who brought her here? Poirot did not answer. Instead, he opened the door. Beyond it lay a gravel path leading around the manor's side toward the southern garden, and, not coincidentally, the location where the shoes had been buried. Whoever killed her knew this house intimately. Poirot said. They knew how to move unseen, how to conceal motion. This was not the work of a stranger. They returned to the manor's main hall, where Bransley approached with an envelope in hand. This was found in Miss Laura's old room, sir, hidden behind a drawer panel. We were clearing it for her. Poirot accepted the envelope carefully. It was sealed with a violet wax stamp, unmarked by initials. He broke it open and unfolded the parchment within. The writing was elegant, looping, assured. Celestini, you think you hold all the cards, but you forget. Power doesn't lie in secrets. It lies in how they're used. Withdraw your threat, or I will do what I must. This is not love. This is war. V. Hastings looked over his shoulder. V. Could that be Vivian? Poirot shook his head. No, she had no power over Celestini. No relationship with her strong enough to provoke such venom. He paused. But the note is unsigned for a reason. Someone was afraid it might be discovered. Someone who had both motive and memory, who remembered what Celestini had threatened to expose. Expose about what? Ah, Poirot said, eyes twinkling. That is the very question. They returned to the parlor, where Vivian now sat alone, sketching furiously in her notebook. Her fingers trembled slightly as she looked up. Monsieur Poirot, is it true what the others said? That the shoes were buried? Yes, Poirot said gently, and I believe you can help me with something else. You see, Celestine's actions before her death, her threats, her withdrawal from the engagement, they were not merely spiteful. They were strategic. She had discovered something worth using. Vivian swallowed. I thought she was just cruel. She said things to people, broke them down. Poirot's gaze softened. Cruelty often masks pain, but strategic cruelty, that is different. That belongs to someone who believes they are in danger. Vivian's eyes dropped to the page in her lap. Poirot saw it now, her drawing. A woman with dark hair, standing on a bridge. But behind her, almost hidden in the shadows, another figure, tall, cloaked. Poirot leaned closer. "You saw someone, didn't you?" Vivian didn't answer. Poirot's voice was calm. Not clearly, but enough to remember. She whispered, "Yes." Poirot nodded slowly, then straightened. "Merci, mademoiselle." Outside, the wind stirred the ivy once more, and Poirot turned to Hastings with a quiet finality. "The threads are weaving together, but not into a knot, Hastings, into a trap, and someone, he thought, was about to step directly into it." Chapter 10. Poirot's secret clue. By the time twilight began to descend over Henslow Manor, the walls of the great house had taken on a somber hue. The sun sank behind the trees with the grace of a curtain fall at the end of a tragedy. Yet for Hercule Poirot, the performance was far from over. He sat alone in the blue study, a modest room seldom used since Lord Hensley's passing. The faint scent of pipe smoke still lingered in the upholstery, though no pipe had been lit in years. Before him, on the desk, lay a neat arrangement: the scuffed shoes, the recovered letters signed only V, a copy of Celestine's guest list from the soirée, and Vivian's notebook open to the sketch she had drawn. Hastings entered, carrying a tray of tea, which he placed quietly beside Poirot. "You haven't spoken much this evening," he said. "That usually means something's coming together." Poirot nodded absently. "Oui, Hastings. A pattern reveals itself only when the pieces cease struggling to hide. The sketch, did you study it carefully? The figure behind Celestine?" "Yes, it's vague. A cloak or coat, possibly male." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but it is not what is drawn that is most revealing, it is what is not." Mademoiselle Vivian did not draw the man's face. She couldn't have seen it. Or perhaps, Poirot murmured, she did, and chose not to. Hastings frowned. "You think she's protecting someone?" "Not consciously, perhaps. But the mind, Hastings, it protects itself. When the truth is too heavy, it hides behind suggestions." Poirot rose, pacing toward the window. His gaze settled on the Sapphire Bridge, just visible through the thin winter trees, the place where the final tableau had been staged. "Do you recall the shoes?" he asked. Hastings nodded. "Of course, not just the fact they were changed, but the detail: one tile cracked before the party, observed by Vivian. And yet, the pair found on Celestine's body were perfect, untouched." Poirot turned, eyes sharp. "How does one acquire a second identical pair of custom shoes, Hastings?" Hastings blinked. "Well, you'd have to order them. From the same cobbler." "Exactly." He retrieved a note from the drawer. "Earlier today I sent a wire to Celestine's cobbler in London. The reply came an hour ago." He held it up. "Yes, the second pair was ordered under a different name. Same design. Paid in cash. Delivered to Henslow Manor 2 weeks prior. Recipient, Bransley." "Bransley?" Hastings exclaimed. Poirot nodded gravely. "Indeed, our silent butler. A man who, until now, has kept to the background. But he has been here for years. He knows the passages, the timing, the family. But why would Bransley need a second pair of shoes?" "He wouldn't," Poirot replied. "Not for himself. But someone did. Someone who could not afford to be seen ordering them in their own name." Hastings narrowed his eyes. "Lady Henslow?" "Non, she would not risk such sloppiness." Poirot's voice dropped. "But someone else might. Someone used to being invisible. Someone like a housemaid, or someone being directed by one." He turned again to the guest list and pointed to a name toward the bottom. "Do you see this?" Hastings leaned closer. "Marianne Elcott, friend of the bride-to-be. But we never saw her, did we?" Poirot tapped the name. "That is because she never existed. It was an alias, a cover used to hide the presence of someone who entered the house on the night of the party, but was never announced. You think the killer wasn't a guest at all? Poirot gave a small, satisfied smile. The killer was never meant to be noticed. Their presence masked the scale of the event. A borrowed gown, a fictitious name, and an old, forgotten passageway. He walked slowly to the fireplace, where a map of the estate had been pinned. Look here, Hastings. The linen corridor connects to the north wing by way of a concealed passage. Through the old chapel storage room, it bypasses the guest chambers entirely. Hastings furrowed his brow. But who would know about that? Poirot answered softly, only someone born in this house. Someone who grew up with its secrets. Someone like Vivian. Hastings froze. You think she did it? No, Poirot said firmly. But I believe she witnessed it or its aftermath. The tears she heard weren't from grief alone. They were from conflict, from conscience. Poirot folded his arms. There is one more thing, mon ami. The note signed V. It was written not by Vivian but to her. The phrasing, the tone, this was not a warning to Celestini. It was a message intercepted and misunderstood. He turned toward the door. I must speak with Vivian again, but this time, not to ask what she saw, to ask what she remembers. Hastings followed him into the corridor, their footsteps quiet against the polished wood. The trap was nearly complete, but Poirot, ever patient, knew the final piece of truth often revealed itself not in confession, but in silence to carefully constructed dot, and in Vivian's silence. He now heard the echo of a name, unspoken but no longer unknown. Chapter 11. Tensions rise. Vivian Hensla sat alone in the Manor's solarium. As the dusk curled around the glass walls like smoke, shadows of bare ivy stretched over the panes. She sat with her knees drawn up to the velvet window seat, sketchpad balanced precariously in her lap, charcoal resting between her fingers. The page before her was blank. She did not turn as Poirot entered. He paused for a moment, watching the soft rise and fall of her shoulders. Then, in a voice gentle but firm, he said, Mademoiselle, may I speak with you again? She didn't look up. It doesn't matter what I say. You'll already have decided. Ah, but none, Poirot replied. I have not decided. I observe. I compare. I am eliminated. And what remains, however unlikely, must be the truth. She let out a slow breath. Then you already know, don't you? Poirot stepped closer. I know that the note found in Celestine's drawer, the one signed only with V, was not written to her. It was written to you. Vivian turned, eyes wide. You were not the sender, Poirot said gently. You were the recipient. And you've been hiding that fact because you understood what it would mean. Her voice trembled. I didn't want to make it worse. I didn't know she'd end up dead. Poirot waited. Vivian exhaled and began. I found it in my room, slipped beneath the door. I never told anyone. I think Celestini discovered something, and someone wanted to warn me. Do you still have the envelope? She nodded and reached for a book, retrieving a slim envelope pressed between its pages. Poirot examined it. No seal, no return name, but the handwriting matched. He nodded once. Merci. I didn't understand it at first, Vivian whispered. I thought it was from Maud, or even from Celestini, playing a game. But then I started noticing things. Whispers behind closed doors, glances that didn't make sense. Poirot's gaze softened. You were afraid? Yes. He stepped back. One more question, mademoiselle. On the night of the party after the guests had retired, did you leave your room? Vivian hesitated. I went to the library, she said at last. Around midnight. I couldn't sleep. I took my notebook, thinking I'd sketch something. And did you see anyone? She looked away. I heard someone, voices, a man and a woman. They were arguing. I only caught fragments. Something about betrayal and legacy. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Legacy, she nodded slowly. Then, something fell, a crash. Then silence. Poirot bowed his head. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been the most brave. As he turned to go, the solarium door burst open. Maud Everleigh stood there, disheveled, her eyes burning. You're accusing her now? She snapped. She's a child, Poirot. She couldn't harm anyone. Poirot's expression remained calm. No, mademoiselle. I do not accuse her. I protect her from the weight of the truth she was never meant to bear. Maud stepped closer, her hands shaking. This isn't justice. This is theater. Poirot inclined his head. But all murder is theater, mademoiselle. A performance driven by fear, desperation, and a desire to control the ending. He turned and left them both in the solarium, heading for the great hall, where the cold firelight flickered beneath the chandelier. There, Bransley was waiting. I've taken the liberty of assembling the household, sir, the butler said in his dry, efficient tone. Per your request, Poirot nodded. Chur's been. One final act remains. Soon, all the figures of the house had gathered again. Maud, Vivian, Lady Henslow, Inspector Braddock, even Giles Ashcombe, released at Poirot's urging, stood brooding by the fireplace. The silence between them crackled like static. Poirot stepped forward. The shoes, the note, the corridor, the sketch, all these were clues, but not just to the murder, to something deeper, something older. He looked directly at Lady Henslow. Madam, may I ask what happened to your younger brother? The room stilled. Lady Hensley's expression barely changed, but a ripple passed through her eyes. He died abroad. Years ago. Poirot's voice remained gentle. And before he left, he had a daughter, did he not? Vivian's eyes snapped to her aunt. What is he talking about? Poirot turned slowly to Vivian. Your mother died when you were very young, but your father did not. He was not a businessman from Bath. He was your aunt's brother, disgraced, disinherited, and banished from this house for marrying a woman Lady Henslow deemed beneath their name. Vivian's lips parted, her eyes stunned. Poirot's voice was low. You were brought here under a lie, raised with strict boundaries, isolated, not allowed to speak with guests, taught not to ask questions. Lady Hensley's mask slipped, but only slightly. I protected her. You hid her, Poirot corrected softly, and Celestine Leroy discovered it. Gasps echoed through the room. Poirot stepped forward. Celestine used that knowledge to control you, madam. She threatened to reveal Vivian's parentage, to ruin the family reputation. But someone else feared it more than you. He turned slowly to Bransley. The butler stood stiff as marble. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Bransley, who was your employer before the Hensleys? Who paid you to keep quiet about what you overheard in the nursery wing 15 years ago? Who delivered the second pair of shoes not as a servant, but as an accomplice? Bransley opened his mouth and closed it again. The room fell into stunned silence. Poirot did not press further. Not yet. Tomorrow, he said softly, we shall gather one last time. And all masks, I assure you, shall fall. And as he walked from the room, a storm of tension stirred behind him, each suspect suddenly aware that, whatever truths they had hidden, Poirot had begun to uncover them all. Chapter 12. The confrontation's morning arrived sharp and brittle. The fog lifted, but the chill biting deeper. Henslow Manor stood still, as if holding its breath, every corridor echoing with a tension that had finally turned brittle. Poirot had requested breakfast be taken separately that day. Minds must digest before truth is served, he had said cryptically. Lady Henslow had not descended at all. Maud Everleigh paced the garden walk, chain-smoking. Vivian lingered in the chapel, her sketchbook closed and untouched for the first time in days. And Bransley, curiously, had vanished. Poirot and Hastings moved through the manor with purpose, stopping outside the butler's quarters in the eastern wing. The door was unlocked. Inside, meticulous neatness, spare furniture, polished boots, every item aligned with surgical precision. But one thing was missing, the uniform, Hastings noted. Gone. Poirot knelt by the writing desk. The inkwell was dry, the blotting paper unmarked. He opened the drawer. A single key lay inside, beside a yellowed envelope. Poirot picked it up. No name. No seal. He opened it. Inside, a page torn from a ledger. It listed bank withdrawals small, regular amounts withdrawn over nearly 10 years. The recipient, an orphanage fund in Wales. Hastings furrowed his brow. What do you make of it? Poirot's gaze was solemn. A man who hides guilt, or tries to absolve it. He turned toward the wardrobe. A long coat was missing. Poirot sighed. We must find him. An hour passed before Bransley was discovered down by the riverbank near the bridge, standing with his back to them, coat wrapped tightly around his thin frame. He did not turn as Poirot approached. I knew you would come, he said, voice quiet and weathered. You always do, don't you? Poirot said nothing. Bransley continued. I loved her, you know, not in the way a man loves a woman, but in the way one loves a soul who shouldn't suffer the things she did. Vivian reminded me of my sister, silent, forgotten, and when I learned what Celestini threatened to expose, his voice broke off. The wind rustled the reeds. She came to me that night, demanding I confess to Lady Hensla, said she'd tell Vivian the truth, not just about her father, about me. Hastings stiffened. About you? Bransley turned, eyes glassy but composed. I was the one who found her father, dead, in the chapel garden, suicide. But it wasn't grief that killed him, it was shame. The family drove him to it. Lady Hensla swore to me to silence, paid me well to disappear that truth, and I did, until Vivian came back, and looked so much like him. Poirot stepped closer. And so Celestini held that truth over you. She wanted power. She didn't care what it meant for Vivian. She wanted leverage for her engagement, for her status, for Giles, and so, Poirot said softly, you struck her. Bransley's expression shifted, not surprise, but sorrow. No, he whispered. I tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't stop. She turned to leave, and slipped. Hit her head on the stone basin. She didn't cry out, just folded. He swallowed. I panicked. I thought if anyone knew she was with me, I'd be ruined. And Vivian would lose everything too. So I did what I could. I moved her, dressed her, the shoes. I buried the pair she wore. I staged it to make it seem romantic, tragic, clean. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. And the second pair, she had them made, for the wedding. She said she wanted to match the bridge. Like poetry, she said. When I saw them, I ordered a second pair myself. I thought, if something ever went wrong, perhaps I could protect her image. Poirot nodded slowly. And when Giles posted the letter to summon me, you knew it was only a matter of time. I tried to stay ahead. I watched, listened, moved pieces, but something slipped, Poirot said. The tile, the cry Vivian heard, the sketch. Bransley gave a tired smile. No secret stays buried in this house, Monsieur Poirot. Not forever. Poirot stepped back, offering no handcuffs, no accusations, only silence. I will go, Bransley said. You needn't force it. Poirot nodded once. That evening, Bransley surrendered himself at the local station. Poirot remained at the manor, seated once more in the blue study, eyes on the flickering hearth. Hastings entered quietly. Do you believe him? Poirot folded his hands. I believe he told us a truth, but not the only one. Hastings frowned. You still think there's more? Poirot nodded gravely. We have the how, even the who, but the why, the deepest why, still remains clouded. He stood. And tomorrow, Hastings, I intend to clear the air entirely, because in Poirot's mind, there was still one final lie lingering in the air, and it did not belong to the butler. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape the following morning broke with a brittle coldness. Frost clung to the windows of Henslow Manor. Creeping over the glass lit the skeletal imprint of some quiet reckoning. The silence in the halls was different now, not anxious, but alert, as though the very walls knew they were no longer safe havens for secrets. Poirot rose early, dressing with his usual fastidious care. His tie was perfectly knotted, his mustaches impeccably waxed, but as he adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes were not on his reflection, they were distant, focused elsewhere. Hastings found him in the study just before breakfast. "I've sent word to the inspector," Poirot said. "He will be here within the hour." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "You believe Bransley's story isn't the end?" Poirot offered a small smile. "Mon ami, when one piece of a puzzle fits too neatly, we must ask, who ranged the board?" Before Hastings could reply, a sound shattered the Commodore, slamming hard, followed by the muffled thud of hurried footsteps across the main hall. Poirot's head turned sharply. He moved to the corridor, Hastings on his heels. From the top of the grand staircase, a servant girl called down breathlessly, "Miss Everleigh, she's run." Out through the west corridor. Poirot did not hesitate. He descended the stairs with remarkable speed for a man of his age and build, Hastings following with less grace but equal urgency. They burst through the side doors into the frozen garden just in time to see a figure darting past the gazebo and toward the woods. Maud Everleigh, still wearing her house coat, her scarf flapping wildly behind her. Poirot paused only to steady himself, then took the shortcut through the hedge path. It cut ahead of the slope leading to the river path, and as Hastings huffed beside him, they emerged just as Maud reached the gate in the iron fence. "Stop, mademoiselle," Poirot called. "You are making a grave mistake." Maud froze. Her hands trembled at the latch. She turned, her breath misting in the air. Her face was pale, haunted. "I didn't kill her," she shouted, as if pleading with the trees. "But I knew she would be." Poirot advanced slowly. "And yet you said nothing." "She blackmailed everyone," Maud cried. "Giles, Bransley, even Lady Henslow. She enjoyed it, holding their secrets like trophies. But the one she didn't count on was me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "What did she know about you?" Maud lowered her voice, as if confessing to herself. "She knew about the paintings, that I'd copied one of the Henslow portraits and sold the original. I needed the money. I thought no one would notice, but she found out, and she said she'd ruin me." Poirot nodded slowly. "So you staged her body?" "No," Maud whispered. "That wasn't me. That was Bransley. I found her after she'd died. He was already trying to clean the scene. I helped him because I thought it would make her death poetic, like she wanted. But I never touched her. I swear." Hastings spoke now, cautious. "Then why run?" Maud's shoulders slumped. "Because Vivian came to me last night." Poirot's expression sharpened. "She told me something." Maud continued. "Something I can't unhear. Celestini didn't just threaten people for money or leverage. She said she was going to destroy the entire family, that she'd discovered a will, a secret one, left by Lord Henslow before his death, one that left everything to Vivian." Poirot was silent for a beat. "Then, and what happened to this will?" Maud's voice dropped to a whisper. "It vanished. After Celestini died, no one ever found it again." Poirot turned slowly, his eyes distant but calculating. "And tell me, mademoiselle, who in this house would benefit most from that will never be found?" Maud blinked. "You think Lady Henslow?" Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Not just benefit, mademoiselle, survive. Without the inheritance, she retains control. With the will, everything passes to a girl she has spent her life hiding." Poirot stepped forward. "Go back to the house. Inspector Braddock will be waiting. You must tell him everything." Maud nodded shakily and allowed Hastings to guide her back up the path. Poirot remained by the gate, staring into the fog-covered woodland where the River murmured faintly in the distance. The attempted flight had not surprised him, but what had surprised him, what disturbed him, was not what Maud had said, but what she had not said, that the will, the motive, the power. He turned on his heel, his voice soft to himself. She threatened Lady Hensla, and that, he now knew, was the final key, because no one staged a death with that much artistry unless the murder itself had been inconvenient, not a crime of passion, but a crime of necessity. And Lady Agatha Hensla, he thought grimly, was a woman who had made an art of surviving. It was time for the curtain to rise on the final act. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into Placide. Drawing room was dim when Poirot returned. Lady Hensla stood by the hearth, her posture like sculpture, elegant, rigid, and prepared for war. She did not look up when he entered. The fire crackled gently, as if to refine, to interrupt. Poirot crossed the room silently, folded his gloved hands behind his back, and watched her for a moment before speaking. Maud Everleigh tried to flee this morning, he said quietly. She believed the truth was coming too quickly. Lady Hensla didn't turn. She always was too nervous for her own good. I never understood Giles' infatuation. Poirot moved closer. She confessed to finding Celestine's body, to help conceal it, but she did not kill her. I imagine not. Poirot's voice remained mild, but his eyes sharpened. What interests me, madam, is how carefully the narrative around Celestine's death was composed. The body, the bridge, the shoes, a tableau, a performance. Now Lady Hensla turned. Her face was calm, regal. She enjoyed performances. Her entire life was one. Poirot nodded. Indeed, but not the final one. That was arranged by someone else. Someone with taste, with power, and with much to lose. She arched a brow, as though in faint amusement. You presume too much, Monsieur Poirot. No, madam, he replied softly. I presume nothing. I observe, I deduce, and I listen. He reached into his coat and drew a folded paper, the copy of the ledger Bransley had tried to burn. Payments, Poirot said, modest, quiet, over the years, to a fund run under a name linked to your late husband's solicitors. Lady Hensla blinked almost imperceptibly. Poirot stepped forward. The will Celestini discovered that was no idle threat. It was real. Lord Hensla revised it before his death. He left the estate to Vivian, all of it, and he entrusted the documents to Bransley, knowing his own wife would never accept it. Lady Hensley's hands closed around the back of the chair, tightening until her knuckles showed white. You silenced the truth, madam, for years, but when Celestini threatened to expose it, you were faced with a dilemma. He moved closer still, voice low and unwavering. You could lose everything: legacy, power, the very name your family guarded like silver. Or you could prevent the revelation. Quietly, elegantly, a long pause followed. Then I did not strike her, Lady Hensla said, her voice calm and clear. Poirot inclined his head. I believe you. Her eyes narrowed. You did not kill her with your hands, but you created the conditions of her death. You called her into the linen corridor under the pretense of reconciliation. You reminded her quietly, cruelly, what she would destroy. You told her that revealing the will would not ruin you, but ruin Vivian, her half-sister. The flicker in Lady Hensley's expression was all the confirmation he needed. She faltered, Poirot said, emotionally, perhaps physically, but Bransley arrived to find her already gone, or too far gone to save. And he, ever loyal, took it upon himself to remove the stain. Lady Hensla exhaled slowly. I tried to dissuade her. That is all. To protect Vivian. She does not know what inheritance means, Monsieur Poirot, what vultures it summons, and you believed yourself justified. Lady Hensla looked away. She would have squandered everything. For poetry, for drawings. Poirot nodded, sadly. You buried the will, didn't you?" "I burned it," she replied quietly, "in the chapel fireplace, after Bransley told me Celestini was dead." Poirot turned to the window, the garden beyond beginning to frost again. "Vivian has the right to know. She has the right to dream," Lady Hensla said, voice now distant. "You may decide which is more valuable." Poirot stood in silence for a long moment, then bowed his head. "There will be no arrest. Not today," he said. "You have not committed a crime of the law, but a crime of the heart, madam, that, I fear, you will carry with you." Lady Hensla looked up sharply. "And what will you do?" Poirot's voice was quiet. "What I must." He turned and left her by the fire, her eyes fixed not on the hearth, but on the cold glass of the window, where her reflection no longer looked like a guardian of legacy, but a sentinel to something long buried. As Poirot returned to the hall, Hastings met him at the threshold. "Well?" Hastings asked. Poirot gave a small, pained smile. "The final piece has fallen, mon ami, and the picture it forms is not one of justice, but of grief." And with that, he walked on toward Vivian, toward the truth, and toward the final reckoning that would not be spoken in a court of law, but in a parlor, beneath ancestral eyes painted long before any of them had learned what silence could cost. Chapter 15. The Final Gathering. Parlor of Hensla Manor had never been so quiet. Late afternoon light filtered through the long windows in pale gold streaks, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily in the still air. The fire had not been lit, the air was cool, but Poirot had requested the room remain as it was unchanged. Untouched, unadorned, Inspector Braddock stood near the door, notebook in hand but expression guarded. Hastings, seated near the bookcase, said nothing. He knew the moment required silence. Seated in the room were the final players, Maud Everleigh, pale and taut, her lips drawn tight but her eyes steady; Giles Ashcombe, no longer defiant, but resigned, hands clasped as if to restrain impulse; Vivian Hensla, her sketchbook resting on her lap unopened, her eyes fixed on Poirot with quiet confusion; and lastly Lady Agatha Hensla, composed as always, but with an unusual stillness, the kind of stillness that no longer sought control, but awaited judgment. Poirot stood in the center. He began not with accusation, but with reflection. "There are crimes, Mzamis," he said softly, "that do not begin with weapons. They begin with words, with promises broken, with fears that grow slowly, like rot beneath paint." No one moved. Celestini Leroy was not loved by everyone, Poirot continued, but she was afraid. She knew too much. She held secrets like strings, tugging at the people around her until they danced in discomfort. She knew about Maud's forgeries, about Giles's debts, about Lady Hensley's manipulation of Vivian's inheritance, and she threatened to reveal it all. He turned toward Maud. "You did not kill her, but your silence gave the real killer time. You acted after the fact, switching the shoes, burying the originals not from guilt, but misplaced loyalty." Maud gave the faintest nod, her eyes glistening. Poirot turned next to Giles. "You, monsieur, lied out of fear, not for yourself, but for what Celestini might have revealed about your past. Your involvement in an illicit investment fund, perhaps?" Giles's jaw tensed. "She found my letters. I told her it was over. She said she'd destroy me, but she was already engaged to you." Hastings interjected. "Why destroy you?" "Because she didn't want me," Giles said quietly. "She wanted to win. That's all she ever wanted." Poirot stepped forward, facing Vivian now. "And you, mademoiselle, you did not know the truth until too late. But you sensed it. I felt it. Saw it in glances, in absences, in the coldness with which your guardian held you at arm's length." Vivian's voice trembled. "She never treated me like family, no," Poirot said gently. "Because if she did, she would have had to admit what your presence meant, that you were her brother's daughter, the rightful heir, Vivian's breath caught, but Poirot raised a hand for calm. She sought to protect the family name, the legacy. But the moment Celestini discovered the revised will, Lady Hensla understood. Her entire empire would pass to the girl she had tried to keep hidden. Poirot turned slowly, now facing Lady Hensla. You did not strike Celestini, but you led her to the place where she would fall. You spoke with her that night. You cornered her with words reminding her of what would be lost, of how she might destroy not you, but Vivian. Lady Hensley's gaze remained steady. I told her the truth, she said simply, that she was reckless, that she had no right to decide the future of a family she did not care for. You did not intend for her to die, Poirot said softly. But she did. In panic, in fury, or in despair we do not know. Bransley found her there. You told him what to do. Braddock stirred. But no one saw her strike the girl. No, Poirot agreed. Because the murder was not committed with a weapon. It was committed with influence, with fear. He turned to the others. Bransley has confessed to staging the body, to disposing of the will, to burying the shoes. But he did so under the weight of a promise, a loyalty owed to Lady Hensla. That began many years before. He was the hand, but she, I believe, was the voice. Lady Hensla spoke at last. I did what I had to do. Poirot stepped back, folding his hands. And now, the truth is known. You may choose to pursue it further in court, Inspector. But I believe the punishment, in this case, has already begun. Lady Hensla has lost what she fought so fiercely to protect. And Vivian, he turned to the girl, you have a right to your name, to your place, but only you can choose what to do with it. Vivian's eyes filled, but she said nothing. Poirot gave a final nod. This mystery was not solved by logic alone, Amos. It was solved by motive, by understanding the fears that hide behind pride, and the silence that cloaks old wounds. He walked to the door. Hastings followed Dot as they stepped into the corridor. Poirot said quietly, Justice, Hastings, is not always a matter of law. Sometimes it is a matter of breath, of who is left standing, and what they must live with. And with that, they left the room behind, filled not with applause or outrage, but with the still, quiet unraveling of a truth that could no longer be ignored. Chapter 16. The revealed fog that had lingered over Hensla Manor for days had finally lifted by morning. A pale, brittle sunlight stretched across the river and fields, throwing long shadows that sharpened every angle of the estate's solemn facade. Yet inside the drawing room, the light fell gently, softened by heavy curtains and the heavy truth that now lay bare. Poirot stood beside the window, a silhouette against the amber sky. In his hand, he held the last piece of Celestini Lira's puzzle, the will, recovered. Not burned, though Lady Hensla had claimed otherwise. Bransley had hidden it, wrapped in waxed cloth, behind the panel of a hollow bench in the manor chapel. It had not been loyalty that made him preserve it, it had been doubtful. Perhaps guilt. A part of him, Poirot suspected, had always wanted it found. Inspector Braddock had been informed. A barrister from London was already en route to verify its authenticity. But for now, Poirot knew, what mattered most was not legal consequence, but moral reckoning. The household had gathered again, but this time not under duress. They were quieter, raw. The layers of pride, anger, and defense had been scraped away. Poirot addressed them with no preamble. The will of Lord Hensla, he said, holding it aloft, signed, witnessed, and legally binding. It names Vivian Hensla as the sole heir to the estate. The discovery of this will, and the threat of its exposure, formed the backbone of the tragedy we have just lived through. He turned to Lady Hensla, who remained seated, unmoving. You told me it was destroyed. She did not look away. I believed it was. That was the arrangement. Poirot shook his head. Bransley could not bring himself to complete the task. He hid it. Perhaps even then, He feared what the truth might cost. Maud, seated near the window, whispered. And Celestini knew. That's why she threatened everyone. Poirot said. She believed she could leverage it either to control Giles or to elevate herself within the family. But she miscalculated. Her threats pushed those around her not toward obedience, but desperation. He turned to Vivian now, his voice softer. You, mademoiselle, are the rightful heir. This house, its lands, its legacy, they belong to you. But more importantly, so does the truth. You have lived in its shadow long enough. Vivian's hands trembled on her lap. I don't know what to do with it, she said faintly. Poirot knelt beside her. Then do not decide today, but know this: your future no longer belongs to someone else's silence. She gave the smallest nod. Eyes glistening, Poirot rose and looked toward Giles, who had said little since the previous day. You, monsieur, must ask yourself, who were you without Celestine's influence? She claimed to own you, but did she ever truly understand you? Giles looked up, something like clarity dawning in his expression. No, and I never truly loved her. I was caught in the theater of it. Poirot nodded. Then let this be the final act, and do not perform for anyone again. Finally, he turned to Lady Hensla. You orchestrated nothing, he said, but you allowed the pieces to fall, one by one. You stood at the top of the staircase and watched the descent, knowing full well what the landing would look like. Lady Hensla spoke in a low, clear voice. I have spent a lifetime protecting a family that no longer exists. I thought I could shape a legacy by sheer will. You shaped a silence, Poirot replied, one that buried love, truth, and in the end Celestini. A long pause. Then, for the first time, Lady Hensley's posture shifted not into collapse, but release. Her hands folded in her lap, eyes cast downward. And now, Poirot said, turning toward the door, it is time we all left this room. He walked out without further words. One by one, the others followed, like shadows withdrawing at dusk in the corridor. Hastings joined him. Do you believe justice was done? He asked quietly. Poirot sighed. Not in the courts, perhaps, but in their hearts, possibly. Sometimes, mon ami, the most powerful justice is the one we must live with. They stepped into the sunlight spilling over the front steps. And Vivian? Hastings asked. Will she stay? Poirot looked toward the horizon. She will decide that, but I believe she will choose not to repeat the mistakes of those before her. He straightened his coat. The past, Hastings, was stitched with secrets, but the future it must be tailored with truth. And with that, Poirot descended the steps, the frost crunching beneath his polished shoes. The case of the mystery beneath the Sapphire Bridge now closed not with chains or gavel, but with something far more enduring. Chapter 17, Outcome and Justiceth Manor grew quieter in the days that followed, as if the truth, once spoken, had hushed every lingering echo of deceit. Inspector Braddock oversaw Bransley's formal statement, and the authorities accepted the butler's confession of staging the scene. Yet no charge of murder was brought. The coroner's report confirmed that Celestine's fatal injury was consistent with an accidental fall, her skull fractured upon impact with the stone basin, not by deliberate force. Maud Everleigh was not prosecuted for concealing evidence. Instead, she chose to leave the manor quietly, her belongings packed and sent ahead to London. Before departing, she left a short note for Vivian, tucked into the girl's sketchbook. Some truths are harder than lies, but I think you'll carry them better than the rest of us ever did. Lady Hensla did not contest the will. She remained in the West Wing, rarely emerging, speaking only when necessary. To the press, she gave no comment. Her power, once wielded like a scepter, had dimmed into solitude. Vivian accepted her inheritance with restraint. She did not claim the master bedroom or redecorate the estate. She made no announcements, granted no interviews. Instead, She opened the long-shuttered music room and moved her sketching desk into the sunlight. Poirot and Hastings returned to London 2 days later, their bags light, but their thoughts heavy, on the train. Hastings looked out over the countryside, rolling past like memory itself. "It's strange," he said, "how the truth changes people." Poirot, sipping his tisane, nodded. "Truth is like a mirror, Hastings. It does not change what it reflects, but it demands we see clearly." Hastings frowned. "Do you think Vivian will be all right?" Poirot smiled faintly. "She will be better than the generation before her, I think. That, mon ami, is all we may hope for." A moment passed. "And Bransley?" Hastings asked. "He will serve time." "Yes," Poirot said, "but he will not be forgotten. His penance was already years long. He paid in loyalty." And silence. As the train slid toward the city, the fog began to roll in once more. But inside the carriage, Poirot remained illuminated by the soft lamp above their seats. His eyes closed briefly in thought, his hands folded gently on his lap. Another case closed. But this one, he knew, would stay with him because it had not ended with a confession, but with understanding. And sometimes, Poirot thought, that was the greater justice. Chapter 18. The closing remarks some weeks later. A letter arrived at Whitehaven Mansions. It was handwritten in a careful, looping hand, on thick parchment embossed with a crest that had once been synonymous with pride. Then Scandaland, now transformation. Monsieur Poirot. The manor is quiet again. The house breathes differently now, as if relieved of something heavy. I have begun to restore the greenhouse. Bransley always loved it, and I think he would have liked that. I found a stack of old drawings I made as a girl, hidden in the back of a wardrobe. They were not very good, but they were mine. Thank you for giving me that freedom to remember. V.H. Poirot folded the letter carefully and placed it atop his correspondence tray. Across the room, Hastings lowered his newspaper and glanced over. "From Vivian?" Poirot nodded. "She writes with clarity and warmth, quite the change," Hastings said thoughtfully. "Do you suppose she'll stay on at Henslow?" "For now," Poirot replied, "but she will not be trapped by it. That house belonged to many ghosts. She has let them go." Hastings stood and moved to the window. "You know, Poirot, it strikes me this case didn't end the way most do. No villain hauled away in cuffs. No courtroom verdict. Just grief and then grace." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but mon ami, is that not often the truest end? The law punishes, yes, but only truth can cleanse." He walked to the mantel, where a single photograph stood in a modest silver frame. Poirot's only concession to sentimentality. It was a portrait of him and Hastings, taken many years ago in Cairo. They both looked younger, less burdened by the weight of what people do to one another. Poirot adjusted the frame with a precise touch, then turned back to Hastings. "Do you recall, Hastings, what I told you on our first case together?" Hastings grinned. "Something about the little gray cells, no doubt." Poirot chuckled. "Mais oui, but also this, that beneath every crime is not merely motive, but meaning. To find the solution, one must understand not only how the crime was done, but why the heart permitted it." Hastings nodded. "And in this case?" Poirot paused for a moment, considering. "In this case, the heart was misled. By fear, by legacy, by love twisted into loyalty. But in the end, those still living have chosen a different path." He stepped to the window and looked out at the city beyond the clatter of trams, the rustle of morning footfall, the low hum of London's endless conversations. "Justice," Poirot murmured, "is sometimes not the closing of a door, but the opening of one." The grandfather clock chimed softly. Poirot reached for his hat and cane. "Well then, Hastings, a new morning. Shall we walk?" Hastings brightened. "A cafe on Fleet Street, perhaps?" "None," Poirot said with a smile. "Today, something simpler. Perhaps a stroll along the Thames. No bridges today, though. They both laughed just enough to ease the memory of the Sapphire Bridge. And together, they stepped into the London mist, the great detective and his faithful friend, leaving behind another mystery unraveled not just with deduction, but with compassion and the deep, unshakable belief that truth, however painful, is always the beginning of healing.